The morning mist clung to the crystalline towers of Vaelthra like ghostly fingers, but Dr. Sarah Chun barely noticed the alien beauty around her. She adjusted the medical scanner on her belt and checked her supply pack one more time. 3 years of working on this distant world had taught her that preparation meant the difference between life and death, especially when dealing with species that the Galactic Medical Council had written off as untreatable. "You sure about this, Doc?" Captain Morris asked through her comm unit. His voice carried the weight of genuine concern. "The Draknari have been clear. They don't want outsiders near their sacred mountain. Last team that tried ended up as charbones." Sarah looked up at the massive peak that dominated the horizon. Mount Therasos rose like a black dagger against the purple sky, its slopes scarred by centuries of volcanic activity. Somewhere up there, according to the whispered rumors she'd picked up in the lower settlements, lived the last of the ancient Draknari dragons. The same dragon that had been slowly dying for over 200 years. "I'm sure," she replied, shouldering her pack. "The Draknari healers have tried everything their traditional medicine offers. If there's a chance I can help, I have to try." The truth was more complicated than that. Sarah had spent months studying the fragments of information about Draknari biology that existed in human databases. Their dragons weren't just animals or even intelligent creatures like the humans had first assumed. They were living gods to the Draknari people, beings whose life force was somehow connected to the health of their entire species. When the last dragon grew sick, the Draknari themselves began to weaken and die. The climb up the mountain took her 2 full days. The atmosphere processors on Vaelthra maintained breathable air for humans, but the altitude still left her gasping. The path wound through ancient stone carvings that told stories she couldn't read, past thermal vents that leaked sulfurous steam into the thin air. More than once, she had to shelter in cave alcoves when Draknari patrol ships passed overhead, their pilots scanning for intruders. On the second evening, as purple twilight painted the rocks around her, Sarah finally reached the dragon's lair. The entrance was massive, easily 50 meters wide, carved into the living rock of the mountain itself. Heat radiated from within, carrying scents of metal and something else, something organic and wrong. The smell of long sickness. She activated her universal translator and stepped into the darkness. "Hello, my name is Dr. Sarah Chun. I'm a healer. I've come to help." The sound that answered her was like nothing she'd ever heard. It started as a low rumble that seemed to come from the mountain itself, then rose into something that might have been words in a language older than human civilization. The ground beneath her feet vibrated with each syllable. Human. The word, when it finally came through her translator, was heavy with exhaustion and pain. "You dare enter the sacred space. You dare approach Therasos the Eternal." Light flared in the depths of the cave, not fire but bioluminescence, the pale blue glow of a dying star. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The dragon was enormous, easily 100 meters from nose to tail, but she could see immediately that something was terribly wrong. What should have been scales that gleamed like polished metal were dull and cracked. Great sections of the creature's hide showed patches of gray rot that spread like infection. One of its wings hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken long ago and never properly healed. But it was the eyes that stopped her cold. They were the size of dinner plates, a deep amber color that should have burned with inner fire. Instead, they held only pain and a weariness so profound it made Sarah's heart ache just to look at them. "Great Therasos," she said, moving slowly closer. Her medical scanner was already picking up readings that made no sense. The dragon's body temperature fluctuated wildly. Its electromagnetic signature was chaotic, spiking, and dropping in patterns that suggested massive internal trauma. "I know you don't know me, and I know my kind hasn't always been welcome here, but I've studied your biology for months. I think I might be able to help." The dragon's massive head lowered until it was only a few meters from where she stood. This close, she could see the intelligence in those ancient eyes, sharp and calculating despite the pain. "Help!" The word was bitter. The Draknari healers speak of help. Their crystal songs ease the pain for moments. Their thermal baths warm my bones briefly. But the rot spreads. The fire within me dies a little more each day. In time, perhaps another decade, perhaps less, I will fade entirely. And with me, my people will follow. Sarah pulled out her medical scanner and held it up so the dragon could see it. This device can see inside your body without causing harm. It can show me what's wrong in ways that traditional healing cannot. Will you let me examine you? For long moments, the only sound in the cave was the dragon's labored breathing. Steam rose from its nostrils with each exhalation, but the heat was weak, inconsistent. Finally, Thyrassos spoke. Why? Your species and mine have had little contact. The Draknari fear you humans, with your strange technologies and your rapid expansion across the stars. Why would you risk your life to help an enemy? Sarah thought about the question, really considered it. Why was she here? The rational answer was that this was simply what healers did. They helped where they could. But there was something deeper, something about the way the Draknari children in the lower settlements looked up at the mountain with such hope and fear. Because suffering is universal, she said finally. Pain doesn't care what species you are or what planet you come from. And because if I don't try, I'll never know if I could have made a difference. The dragon studied her for what felt like hours. Then, slowly, it lowered its great head to the stone floor of the cave. Very well, human healer. Look upon the failing body of a god, and see what your science can accomplish where divine power has failed. Sarah activated her scanner and began the examination. What she found defied everything she thought she knew about biology. The dragon's body was unlike anything in human medical databases. Its bones were hollow like a bird's, but reinforced with crystalline structures that seemed to channel and amplify bioelectric energy. Its organs were arranged in patterns that suggested multiple redundant systems, as if the creature had been designed to survive almost any trauma. But something was attacking those systems from within. The scanner showed massive cellular damage throughout the dragon's body, the kind of destruction that suggested radiation poisoning, but the readings didn't match any form of radiation humans had encountered. It was as if the dragon's own body was slowly consuming itself from the inside out. When did this start? She asked, moving the scanner along the creature's flank. What happened 200 years ago? War, Thyrassos said simply. The Draknari fought among themselves, clan against clan. I tried to stop it, used too much of my life force to heal the land, to restore what battle had destroyed. Something broke inside me that day. I have been dying slowly ever since. Sarah stopped moving. The readings on her scanner suddenly made sense. You overloaded your bioelectric system. The energy channels in your bones, they're damaged. But not just damaged. They're trying to repair themselves using your own life force as fuel. It's creating a feedback loop that's slowly consuming you. Your words mean nothing to me, the dragon replied, but there was something new in its voice. Not hope exactly, but perhaps the first faint stirring of curiosity it had felt in decades. It means I think I know what's wrong with you, Sarah said, her excitement growing as the pieces fell into place. And if I'm right, if I can find a way to interrupt that feedback loop and give your body's natural healing system the chance to work properly, then maybe we can fix this. The dragon raised its head, those ancient amber eyes focusing on her with an intensity that made Sarah feel like she was being examined all the way down to her soul. You believe you can heal what 2 centuries of Draknari medicine could not. I don't know, Sarah admitted, but I have tools and knowledge that they don't. Human medical technology works differently than Draknari healing methods. Sometimes a fresh perspective is all that's needed. And if you fail, Sarah met the dragon's gaze without flinching. Then, at least we tried. But if I succeed, if I can restore your health, what then? What happens when you're strong again? For the first time since she'd entered the cave, something like humor flickered in Thyrassos' eyes. Then, human healer, the galaxy will remember why dragons were once feared among the stars. The next morning, Sarah began her real work. She'd spent the night in the cave, curled up in her thermal sleeping bag near one of the dragon's massive feet, listening to its labored breathing and planning her approach. The medical supplies she'd brought were limited, designed for human physiology, but the principles of cellular regeneration were universal. Her first step was to map the dragon's entire bioelectric system. Using her scanner in combination with a small probe she designed for deep tissue analysis, she traced the pathways of energy through the creature's body. What she found amazed her. The dragon was essentially a living battery, capable of storing and channeling enormous amounts of bioelectric power. That power was what allowed it to fly despite its size, what gave it its legendary breath weapon, and what connected it to the life force of its people. But the system was catastrophically damaged. Energy was bleeding out through microscopic fractures in the crystalline matrix of the dragon's bones. Worse, the creature's body was desperately trying to repair those fractures by converting its own tissues into replacement crystalline structures. It was like watching someone slowly turn to stone from the inside out. The process is accelerating, she told Thyrassos as she reviewed her findings. Your body is consuming itself faster now than it was even a year ago. If we don't intervene soon, you might have weeks rather than years. The dragon accepted this news with the same weary resignation it had shown for everything else. Then, I will see the final sunset sooner than expected. So be it. No, Sarah said firmly. Not so be it. I have an idea, but it's going to be dangerous. For both of us. She explained her plan. Human medical technology included devices called cellular regenerators, machines that could stimulate damaged tissue to heal itself at an accelerated rate. But they were designed for human biology, calibrated for human cellular structures and bioelectric patterns. Using one on a dragon would be like trying to jumpstart a starship engine with a household battery. Unless she could modify the regenerator's output to match the dragon's unique biology. I can reprogram the device, she said, already pulling components from her medical kit. But I'll need to interface it directly with your bioelectric system to calibrate it properly. That means creating a direct neural link between the regenerator and your nervous system. What are the risks? Thyrassos asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. If I get the calibration wrong, the regenerator could overload your nervous system. You could die instantly. Or worse, it could leave you brain-damaged, aware, but unable to move or think clearly. And if I get it right, it could interrupt the feedback loop that's killing you and give your natural healing systems the boost they need to repair the damage. You could be completely healed within days. The dragon considered this. Outside the cave, the wind was picking up, carrying the scents of the valley below. Somewhere down there, Sarah knew, the Draknari people were going about their daily lives, unaware that their god lay dying on the mountain above them. There is another risk you have not considered, Thyrassos said finally. What's that? If you succeed, if you restore my strength, I will be connected to you through the neural link. Your thoughts, your memories, your very essence will be known to me. I will see everything you are, human healer, and you will see what I am in return. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. A mental link with an alien intelligence, especially one as ancient and powerful as a dragon, could be overwhelming. Human minds weren't designed to process the kind of sensory input and emotional depth that a creature like Thyrassos might possess. Could it kill me? She asked. It could drive you mad, the dragon replied honestly. Or it could change you in ways that would make you no longer entirely human. The choice is yours, Sarah-chun. Save yourself and let me die in peace, or risk everything for the chance to heal both of us. Sarah looked at her hands, small and soft compared to the massive scales around her. She thought about the easy life she could have had, treating minor injuries and routine illnesses in some comfortable human colony. She thought about her family back on Earth, who would never understand why she'd chosen to risk her life for an alien creature on a world they couldn't even pronounce. Then, she thought about the Draknari children she'd seen in the settlements, growing weaker each day as their dragon slowly died. "Let's do it," she said, and began modifying the regenerator. The neural interface took Sarah 3 days to build. Working by the blue glow of Tharassos' bioluminescence, she carefully rewired the cellular regenerator, replacing its standard human neural adapters with a complex array of sensors and transmitters that could interface with the dragon's alien nervous system. Her hands shook slightly as she made the final connections, knowing that one wrong calculation could kill them both. "Your technology is crude, but ingenious," Tharassos observed, watching her work with ancient eyes that missed nothing. "You humans compensate for your short lives by creating tools that extend your capabilities. It is not unlike how we dragons learn to channel the very forces of creation through our bodies." Sarah paused in her work to wipe sweat from her forehead. Even with the environmental suit's cooling system, the heat radiating from the dragon's body made the cave uncomfortably warm. "Tell me about that. About how your people learned to use bioelectric energy." The dragon's massive head tilted slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed both surprise and amusement. "Why do you wish to know?" "Your device does not require such knowledge to function. Because if I'm about to link my mind with yours, I like to understand what I'm connecting to," Sarah replied honestly. "And because I'm curious. Humans are naturally curious about things we don't understand." "Ah, curiosity. Yes, I remember that trait well." Tharassos settled his great bulk more comfortably on the stone floor, his voice taking on the cadence of someone telling an old, familiar story. "Long ago, when the galaxy was young and the stars burned brighter, my people were not as you see me now. We were smaller, weaker, little more than intelligent reptiles on a world of constant volcanic upheaval." As he spoke, Sarah continued working on a neural interface, but part of her attention was captured by the dragon's words. She had studied alien biology for years, but she had never heard a first-hand account of evolutionary adaptation from a being that had lived through millennia of change. "Our world was harsh," Tharassos continued. "The ground shook with endless earthquakes. Rivers of molten rock flowed where cooler lands should have been. Most life forms fled to other worlds or simply died out. But we adapted. We learned to absorb the energy from the volcanic activity, to channel it through our bodies, and use it to grow stronger. That's why your bone structure is crystalline," Sarah realized. "It's not just for storing bioelectric energy. It's for channeling geothermal power." "Precisely. Over thousands of generations, we became living conduits for the planet's own life force. We grew larger, more powerful, capable of flight, and other abilities that defied the normal laws of biology. But with that power came responsibility." Sarah looked up from her work. "What kind of responsibility?" "The power we channeled didn't come without cost. The more energy we drew from the planet, the more unstable it became. We learned that we had to give back as much as we took, maintaining the balance that kept our world habitable. We became guardians, protectors not just of our own people, but of all life on our planet." "And that's what you did during the war," Sarah said, understanding beginning to dawn. "You tried to heal the damage the fighting had caused, but you pushed yourself beyond your limits. I was young then, barely 300 years old. I thought my power was limitless, that I could restore anything, heal any wound. The war had torn great scars in the land itself. Cities had been reduced to glass by orbital bombardments. Entire forests had been turned to ash. I reached deep into my life force and tried to heal it all at once." The sadness in the dragon's voice was profound, carrying the weight of 2 centuries of regret. Sarah found herself setting down her tools and moving closer to the great creature's head, drawn by an impulse to offer comfort that transcended species. "You saved your world," she said softly. "The readings I took when I first arrived on Vaelthra show a planet in perfect ecological balance. Whatever you did worked." "Yes, but the cost." Tharassos' voice trailed off. "I felt something break inside me that day. The energy channels that had allowed me to channel planetary forces became cracked, leaking. Instead of drawing power from the world around me, I began consuming my own life force to maintain basic functions. Sarah nodded, her understanding of the dragon's condition becoming clearer. And because you're connected to your people through some kind of biological link, your weakening has affected them as well. The Draknari were created by my people in ages past, Thyrassos explained. Not through breeding, but through direct genetic manipulation. We needed intelligent servants to help us maintain the planetary balance, beings capable of understanding complex ecological systems, but not powerful enough to disrupt them accidentally. We gave them a portion of our own life force, creating a permanent connection between their species and ours. So when you die, they die too, Sarah said grimly. Not immediately, but without a dragon to channel and regulate the planetary energies they depend on, their life force will slowly fade. They have perhaps 50 years after my death before the last of them succumbs. Sarah returned to her work with renewed determination. The neural interface was nearly complete now, a complex web of sensors and quantum processors that would allow human and dragon minds to synchronize temporarily. She had built in multiple safeguards, circuit breakers that would sever the connection if either of their nervous systems showed signs of dangerous overload. But she knew that safeguards could only do so much. What they were about to attempt had never been tried before, the joining of two completely alien forms of consciousness for the purpose of healing. There were no textbooks for this, no established procedures to follow. "It's ready," she said finally, holding up the completed device. It was about the size of a human hand, covered in blinking lights and delicate crystalline components. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I've been dying slowly for 200 years, Thyrassos replied. "If there is a chance, however small, to break free from that fate, I must take it. Are you prepared for what you might see when our minds link?" Sarah thought about that question. How could anyone prepare to share consciousness with a being that had lived for over 1,000 years? A creature that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, that had channeled the very forces that shaped worlds? "No," she admitted, "but I'm ready to try anyway." She approached the dragon's massive head, the neural interface held carefully in both hands. Up close, she could see the intricate patterns in Thyrassos' scales, each one unique and beautiful despite the spreading gray rot. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, and underneath that, something else, a faint electrical field that made her skin tingle. "Where should I place it?" she asked. "Here," the dragon said, lowering his head until his forehead touched the stone floor. "There's a cluster of nerve endings just behind my eyes. In humans, I believe you would call it the frontal lobe." Sarah found the spot Thyrassos indicated, a small depression in the massive skull where the scales were smaller and more sensitive. She placed the neural interface carefully, watching as its adaptive connectors began to extend, seeking nerve pathways to link with. "I'm going to put on my own interface now," she said, showing Thyrassos a much smaller device designed for human neurology. "Once both are active, the link will establish automatically. Are you ready?" "I am ready, Sarah-chun. Thank you for giving an old dragon hope." Sarah placed her own neural interface against her temple and activated both devices simultaneously. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. One moment she was herself, Dr. Sarah-chun, human healer, standing in an alien cave on a distant world. The next moment, she was vast, ancient, her consciousness spread across a body the size of a small spacecraft. She could feel every scale, every internal organ, the slow pulse of damaged bioelectric systems throughout her enormous form. But more than that, she could feel Thyrassos' memories flooding through her mind. 1,000 years of experience compressed into seconds. She saw the early days when dragons soared through the skies of dozens of worlds, magnificent beings of pure energy and will. She witnessed the great works they had accomplished, reshaping entire planets to support life, creating species through careful genetic manipulation, establishing the delicate balances that kept ecosystems stable across vast reaches of space. And She felt the loneliness, the crushing weight of being one of the last of his kind. Most of the ancient dragons had died in the great wars that had swept through the galaxy centuries ago. Others had simply grown tired of existence and allowed themselves to fade away. Thyrassos was perhaps the very last, and with his death would die not just the Draknari, but knowledge and wisdom accumulated over millennia. Through the link, she sensed Thyrassos experiencing her memories as well. Her childhood on Earth, her medical training, her first encounters with alien species, her decision to dedicate her life to healing wherever it was needed. She felt his surprise at the intensity of human emotions, the way they burned bright and fast compared to the deep, slow feelings of dragons. But underneath the exchange of memories, she could feel something else, the damaged bioelectric system that was slowly killing him. Through her enhanced perception, she could see it clearly now, the intricate network of crystalline pathways that should have glowed with steady power, but instead flickered and sparked chaotically. The damage was extensive, but not irreparable. If she could just find a way to stabilize the system long enough for his natural healing abilities to take effect. Working through the neural link, Sarah began to reprogram the cellular regenerator. Instead of trying to impose human healing patterns on alien biology, she used Thyrassos' own nervous system as a template. She felt the dragon's amazement as she worked, her human adaptability and problem-solving skills allowing her to find solutions that pure dragon instinct could never have conceived. Your minds work so quickly, Thyrassos' thoughts whispered through the link, like sparks jumping between stones. In my time, I might have puzzled over this problem for decades. And your mind holds knowledge that humans could study for lifetimes and never fully understand, Sarah replied without speaking, her thoughts flowing directly to him. We make a good team. Together, they calibrated the regenerator to match the dragon's unique biology. The device began to pulse with a rhythm that matched Thyrassos' heartbeat, sending carefully modulated energy pulses through his damaged bioelectric system. Where the pulses touched damaged crystalline structures, Sarah could feel them beginning to resonate, their natural healing responses awakening for the first time in centuries. The process was slow and delicate. Too much energy would overload already stressed systems. Too little would be insufficient to break the destructive feedback loops that had been killing him. Sarah found herself drawing on knowledge she didn't consciously possess, dragon wisdom that flowed through the neural link, combined with human medical training in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. Hours passed as they worked together, minds linked in a partnership that transcended the boundaries of species. Sarah felt herself changing, her consciousness expanding to accommodate perspectives and sensory input that no human had ever experienced. She could feel the life force of every living thing for kilometers around, sense the deep currents of geothermal energy that flowed through the planet's crust, perceive the intricate web of connections that linked all life together. And slowly, gradually, she felt Thyrassos beginning to heal. The chaotic energy patterns in his bioelectric system started to stabilize. Damaged crystalline structures began to regenerate, growing new pathways to replace those that had been destroyed. The gray rot that had been spreading across his scales stopped advancing and began to recede. "It's working," she thought to him, her excitement flowing through the link like warm sunlight. "I can feel your systems stabilizing." But even as she celebrated their success, Sarah sensed something else changing. The neural link that was allowing them to work together so effectively was also altering her on a fundamental level. Her human nervous system was adapting to accommodate dragon-level sensory input and processing capability. She was becoming something new, something that was neither fully human nor dragon, but a unique synthesis of both. "Sarah," Thyrassos' thoughts carried a note of concern. "The changes in your neural patterns are accelerating. If we don't disconnect soon, they may become permanent." Sarah could feel it too, the way her consciousness was expanding beyond normal human limits. Part of her was terrified by the transformation. But another part, the part that had always been driven to help others regardless of the personal cost, found the changes fascinating rather than frightening. Not yet, she replied. Your healing isn't complete. The regenerator needs constant guidance for at least another hour to finish repairing the worst damage. If we disconnect now, the process might fail. Then, you risk losing yourself entirely, Thyrassos warned. Is my life worth such a sacrifice? Sarah considered the question, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on her transformed consciousness. Through the neural link, she could sense the Draknari people in the settlements below, their life force already beginning to strengthen as their dragon's health improved. She could feel the potential for healing that extended far beyond just one creature, the possibility of restoring balance to an entire world. Yes, she said finally, it is. Sarah maintained the neural link for 3 more hours, guiding the cellular regenerator through the delicate process of healing 2 centuries of damage. She felt her human consciousness stretching and adapting, becoming something larger and more complex than anything her species had ever achieved. When the process was finally complete, when Thyrassos' bioelectric system hummed with steady, powerful energy for the first time in 200 years, she almost couldn't bring herself to disconnect. The sensation of being vast and ancient, of feeling the life force of an entire world flowing through her awareness, was intoxicating. But she could sense Thyrassos' growing concern for her welfare, and beneath that, her own human instincts warning her that she was approaching a point of no return. It is time, the dragon's thoughts whispered through their shared consciousness. You have given me more than I ever dared hope for. Do not sacrifice what makes you uniquely human for my sake. With great effort, Sarah began the disconnection sequence. The withdrawal was almost painful, like losing a cherished friend, as her consciousness contracted back to merely human dimensions. Colors that had been impossibly vivid faded to normal spectrum. The sense of connection to all living things diminished to barely perceptible background noise. She was herself again, but changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. When she opened her eyes, she found herself looking up at a transformed dragon. Where Thyrassos had been dull and dying, now he gleamed like polished metal. His scales had regained their mirror-bright finish, reflecting the cave's bioluminescent glow in brilliant patterns. His eyes burned with renewed fire, ancient amber orbs that seemed to hold the light of stars. Most dramatically, the gray rot that had been spreading across his body was completely gone, replaced by healthy, vibrant scales that pulsed with barely contained energy. But it wasn't just his physical appearance that had changed. Sarah could feel the power radiating from him, a sense of barely restrained force that made the air itself seem to thrum with potential. This was what a dragon in perfect health looked like, and it was both beautiful and terrifying. How do you feel? She asked, her voice hoarse from the long procedure. Thyrassos stretched his massive wings for the first time in decades, the membranes catching the cave's light like stained glass windows. I feel as though I could reshape worlds, he said, his voice now carrying undertones of power that made the stone walls vibrate. The life force flows through me as it did in my youth. I am whole again. He turned those burning eyes toward Sarah, studying her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. But you are changed as well, human healer. I can sense the alterations in your neural patterns, the expanded pathways that our joining created. How do you feel? Sarah took inventory of herself, noting the subtle differences in her perception. Her medical scanner, when she checked it, registered her vital signs as normal but somehow enhanced. Her heartbeat was steadier, her reflexes faster, her sensory perception noticeably sharper than it had been before the link. Different, she admitted, but still me. I think. You are more than you were, Thyrassos said gently. But you remain essentially human. The changes should stabilize over time, leaving you with abilities that bridge our 2 species without overwhelming your core nature. Before Sarah could ask what specific abilities he meant, a new sound echoed through the cave. The deep, resonant notes of Draknari horn calls, coming from multiple directions around the mountain. The sound was urgent, almost frantic. "My people," Thyrassos said, lifting his great head toward the cave entrance. "They sense the change in me. They are coming." Within minutes, the cave was filled with Draknari. They came in small groups at first, scouts and mountain watchers who had been monitoring the sacred peak for signs of their god's condition. But as word spread down the mountain, more arrived. Families with younglings who had never seen their dragon in full health. Elders who remembered the old days but had given up hope of ever seeing them return. Sarah watched in amazement as the Draknari approached Thyrassos with a mixture of reverence and joy that transcended species barriers. They were humanoid in basic shape, but clearly reptilian in origin, their scaled skin ranging from deep emerald to burnished gold. When they spoke, their voices carried harmonic undertones that she suspected were partly telepathic. "Great One," the apparent leader of the group said, prostrating himself before the dragon. "The life force flows strong again. We felt it in our bones, in our blood. You are restored." "I am healed," Thyrassos confirmed, his voice gentle despite its power. "But not by my own efforts alone. This human, Dr. Sarah Chun, accomplished what 2 centuries of our own healing could not achieve." The Draknari turned towards Sarah with expressions of wonder and gratitude. Several of them approached her cautiously, their head crests fluttering in what she somehow knew was a sign of respect and amazement. "Human healer," the leader said, "you have given us back our god, our protector, our life itself. How could such a debt ever be repaid?" Sarah felt overwhelmed by their gratitude. She had come to this world simply to help where she could, driven by her medical oath to heal suffering wherever she found it. She hadn't expected to become the savior of an entire species. "No debt is owed," she said, trying to find words that would translate properly. "Healing is what I do. It's what I am." But even as she spoke, she could sense that the situation was more complicated than simple gratitude. Through her enhanced perception, a lingering effect of a neural link with Thyrassos, she could feel undercurrents of concern and uncertainty among the gathered Draknari. They were grateful, yes, but they were also afraid. It was Thyrassos who gave voice to their concerns. "My people wonder, as do I, what changes my restoration will bring. For 200 years, they have lived quietly, avoiding contact with the galactic community, content to tend their world in isolation. But I am no longer dying. My presence will once again be felt across the star systems. There are those who will take notice." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. She had studied galactic history during her medical training. Dragons had once been a major force in the galaxy, beings of immense power whose conflicts could destroy entire star systems. Their apparent extinction had allowed other species, including humans, to expand and establish new civilizations in territories that had once been dragon domains. "You're worried about territorial disputes," she said. "Other species moving into regions they thought were permanently abandoned." "Among other things," Thyrassos replied grimly, "there are also those who remember the old ways, who viewed dragons as obstacles to their own expansion. They may see my return to health as a threat to be eliminated." The eldest of the Draknari, an ancient female whose scales had faded to pale silver, stepped forward. "Great Thyrassos, perhaps it would be wise to continue appearing weak for a time, until we can assess the political situation among the stars." But Thyrassos shook his massive head. "No more deception. I have hidden my true nature for too long, allowed fear to dictate my actions. If there are those who would challenge me, let them come. They will find that reports of dragon extinction have been greatly exaggerated." Sarah felt a thrill of unease at the dragon's words. She had healed him, yes, but she was beginning to understand that she might have also unleashed something that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Through her enhanced senses, she could feel the energy building in Thyrassos, not malevolent, but vast and barely contained. "What will you do now?" she asked. "First, I will restore the planetary balance that has been slowly deteriorating in my weakness," Thyrassos said. They're ecological systems that need attention, energy flows that must be rebalanced. My people have done well in my decline, but there are some things only a dragon can accomplish. As if to demonstrate, the great creature began to glow from within. Bioelectric energy flowed along the crystalline pathways in his bones, building to levels that made the air itself shimmer. Sarah's enhanced senses could feel the power extending beyond the cave, reaching into the mountain itself, connecting with the planet's deep geothermal systems. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the mountain, thermal vents that had been dormant for decades suddenly blazed to life. Seismic sensors across the planet would later register a massive, but perfectly controlled release of tectonic pressure that prevented several major earthquakes. The aurora-like energy discharges in Vaelthura's upper atmosphere, which had been fading for years, suddenly flared to brilliant life. Now let the galaxy take notice, Thyrassos said with satisfaction. Let them see that Vaelthura is under dragon protection once more. Over the following days, Sarah remained on the mountain as Thyrassos completed his restoration of the planetary systems. She watched in fascination as he worked, using his regained abilities to repair environmental damage, stabilize weather patterns, and revitalize ecosystems that had been slowly declining during his illness. But more than that, she found herself serving as an intermediary between the dragon and the human colonial authority that governed this sector of space. When Captain Morris and his team finally made contact, demanding an explanation for the massive energy readings coming from Vaelthura, it was Sarah who helped negotiate the first formal diplomatic contact between humans and dragons in over 3 centuries. You understand both our natures now, Thyrassos explained during one of their private conversations. The neural link changed you in ways that make you uniquely suited to bridge our species. You carry within you something of dragon wisdom combined with human adaptability. Sarah had begun to understand what he meant. Her medical skills had been enhanced to an extraordinary degree. She could now sense the bioelectric patterns of living beings across species barriers, diagnose problems that traditional instruments couldn't detect, and even guide healing processes through direct manipulation of life force energy. She was becoming something new, the first of what might eventually be a new branch of human evolution. The galaxy is changing, Thyrassos continued. My return to health is only the beginning. There are other dragons still alive among the distant stars, others who went into deep hibernation rather than face slow death. Your success here will encourage them to wake, to reclaim their ancient territories and responsibilities. And you think humans and dragons can coexist peacefully? Sarah asked. I believe we must, the dragon replied. Separately, both our species face challenges that may prove insurmountable. The galaxy contains threats that even dragons cannot face alone. But together, combining human ingenuity with dragon power, we might accomplish what neither could achieve in isolation. The proof of his words came sooner than expected. 3 weeks after Sarah's successful healing of Thyrassos, long-range sensors detected an approaching fleet of ships. They weren't human vessels, nor were they from any of the known allied species. The ships were massive, clearly built for war, and they were heading directly for Vaelthura. Zakari, Thyrassos identified them, his voice carrying notes of old anger. Raiders and slavers from the dark nebulae. They must have detected my energy signature when I restored the planetary systems. Sarah studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. The fleet was enormous, hundreds of ships ranging from fighters to massive dreadnoughts. Even with Thyrassos restored to full health, she wasn't sure a single dragon could stand against such numbers. Can you fight them? She asked. I could destroy their fleet, Thyrassos replied matter-of-factly. But doing so would require unleashing forces that could damage Vaelthura itself. My people would survive, but their world might not. That was when Sarah had her second breakthrough idea. What if you didn't have to fight alone? She explained her concept rapidly. Using her enhanced abilities as a bridge, She could create a limited neural network linking Thyrasos with the human colonial defense fleet, and even with some of the Draknari who had shown latent psychic abilities. Instead of one dragon facing hundreds of enemies, it would be a coordinated defense force combining dragon power, human tactics, and Draknari technical knowledge. The battle that followed would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, dragon fire blazed in space combat, but guided by human strategic thinking and supported by advanced technology. The Zakari fleet, expecting to overwhelm a single Guardian, instead faced a perfectly coordinated defense that combined the best abilities of three species. Thyrasos engaged the largest enemy ships directly, his massive form moving through space with impossible grace, breathing streams of directed energy that could cut through battle cruiser armor like tissue paper. Meanwhile, human fighters guided by Sarah's neural coordination struck with precision at weak points the dragon's enhanced senses identified. Draknari vessels, their crews linked into the network, provided supporting fire and electronic warfare that confused and disrupted enemy communications. The battle was over in hours. The surviving Zakari ships fled back toward the dark nebulae, carrying word that Vaelthra was once again under dragon protection, and that this dragon had powerful new allies. In the aftermath, as Sarah helped coordinate rescue efforts for damaged ships and injured crews, she realized that everything had changed. The successful defense of Vaelthra had proved that cooperation between species could accomplish what none could achieve alone. But more than that, it had announced to the galaxy that a new age was beginning. "You have given me more than my health," Thyrasos told her as they watched the last of the enemy ships disappear into hyperspace. "You have shown me a path to the future. Dragons and humans working together could bring peace and prosperity to worlds that have known only conflict." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of destiny settling around her shoulders. She had come to Vaelthra as a simple healer, hoping to help one suffering creature. Instead, she had become the catalyst for what might be the most important alliance in galactic history. "What happens now?" she asked. Thyrasos's eyes gleamed with possibilities that stretched across the stars. "Now we begin the real work. There are other dragons to awaken, other worlds to heal, other species that could benefit from the cooperation we have pioneered. The galaxy is vast, Sarah Chun, and there is much healing yet to be done." As Sarah looked up at the stars beginning to appear in Vaelthra's darkening sky, she felt her enhanced senses reaching out, touching the edges of life forces scattered across unimaginable distances. Somewhere among those stars were dragons sleeping in forgotten caves, waiting for someone to show them that there was still hope, still reason to return to the galaxy of the living. She had saved one dragon and changed the course of history. Now, together with Thyrasos and their growing alliance of species, she would help reshape the galaxy itself. The age of isolation and conflict was ending. The age of cooperation and healing had begun. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that Sarah had known from the beginning. Suffering was universal, but so was the capacity for hope, healing, and the courage to reach across the vast differences between species to offer help to those who needed it most. The galaxy would never be the same, and that Sarah realized was exactly as it should be.